Welcome back to Open Line, talking about why are people so obsessed with true crime? What does it say really about all of us, and how unusual is it? Is it anything new? But there are podcasts, there are movies, there are all kinds of things everywhere. Happy to have with us Dr. Anna Settle, licensed psychologist, and several calls. So let's go to, I want to go to Lucy. Lucy, hello.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, what's on your mind? What do you think?
Well, what do I think?
Yes.
Dr. Settle, thanks for coming on and kind of educate the public a little bit. I've got some comments, but I've got a big question. You know, I kind of get tired of hearing how poor people are the criminals a whole lot. I moved from a very poor neighborhood to a middle-class neighborhood, and I was fooled. And in my old age, going back, trying to look up people or run into people, how so-and-so, I've heard some pretty horrid stories, and I've looked them up, and I'm like, that is what happened, and, you know, I never thought that person would have been that way. There are quite a few of them, and these people were white, middle class, good jobs, good neighborhoods, plenty of spending money, but that didn't seem to be enough. What I remember, I studied Ted Bundy right about the time that he was going to trial. And my only regret about him being executed is that we don't know what all he did. And I remember that he worked at a suicide prevention line, that he was being groomed to be the possible governor of the state of Washington, possibly Republican presidential material, all these things. He was that charming. And I think we do let our guards down with people like that, and that's what's so shocking. I don't know why people now all of a sudden are becoming this obsessed. Maybe it's social media, and that's where my question's going to come from. But I've been trying to look at a crime that goes way back over 40 years, almost 50 years now, and I'm very guarded about saying anything to too many people, because nowadays people just run with that stuff. They're like thrilled by it. I've talked to people that have had family members murdered, and they've told me one thing, and I've done some research and found out that they're in some sort of state of denial over the murder itself. So I don't like to dig, but Dr. Settle, here's my question. Do you think that social media, people with Facebook, I don't have any of that stuff, but do you think that we're really harming solving some crimes and putting a lot of misinformation out there when we use social media? I'll run across stuff from time to time and think, you know, that's kind of coincidental, but I wouldn't dare put that out on social media. I'd rather turn it over to the authorities or something. But do you think that we've gone a little bit too nuts with this, with social media, and we're harming victims? And I'll hang up and take your comments offline. Thank you, Lucy. Social media question. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it desensitizes us to what's happening. So when we're reading about, you know, murders, school shootings, bombings, it certainly takes our sensitivity to the actual situation away. So what she was asking in terms of, is it harming the victims or is it harming the cases? I don't necessarily know that that's the case. I've seen a lot of cases that have actually been bolstered by some social media pages where people are putting things out there that they wouldn't necessarily report to the police. So I've seen good and bad with that. I think the biggest piece with social media is the way that it's desensitizing us and making these things seem more normal.
There is no doubt, yeah, desensitized is the way to put it. Now, as an interesting point, yeah, there are also people that will post exactly where they were and maybe pictures of what they're doing, and that helps police solve certain crimes and that kind of thing. But yeah, as a society, the desensitized part, I get what you're saying there. Yeah,
and I think sometimes there are defendants who are, before they've been caught, who are posting things, you know, and we see, I mean, there's a recent case where we saw the psychosis sort of flowering on the Facebook page, and so that, you know, that also is evidence that will help people, help us determine if the person was insane at the time of the crime, and hopefully help us apprehend them.
And so then the question that maybe Lucy is also getting at is, in this age where maybe social media does desensitize people to things, do we have more? Is there any way to know throughout history? Do we have more of these horrible kinds of people, more of these serial killers, or less of them? You know, are we evolving away from that? Have we always had them? Do we used to have a lot more? You know, when Ted Bundy was doing his thing, it was such a different time, and he was allowed to do it based on, it seemed like when you watch that, the naivete, the naivety of those around him, you know. And I wonder if could he have done as much today? And then my other question is, do you think there are more serial killers or fewer serial killers now?
Yeah, so the second question, I really don't know the answer to that, because we've just come such a long way in terms of being able to uncover DNA evidence and just the way that we investigate the cases and the murders. It's hard to know, to go back in time and say, okay, well, if we had the same resources that we have now, would there still be the same number of people that are being arrested for these types of crimes? So I don't know the answer to that question. And what was your first question?
I guess it just spoke to that. Yeah, with social media the way it is it creating more? And I guess we just don't know.
Right. Yeah. There's really no way to know if there are more now than historically there were. You were talking about Ted Bundy and how he kind of desensitized the people around him. Yeah. I certainly think that the prison system is different now. We sort of tend to err on the side of caution and assume that somebody's going to try to elope, or assume that somebody's going to try to be aggressive. And then there's a way, I mean, there are level systems in the prison where people can earn privileges and a few freedoms within the confines of the prison, but we don't, you know, allow people to jump out of courtroom windows. Things are a little bit different now.
He escaped twice.
Right.
And after that happened, more people died. It's truly horrible. Let's go to James. Hello, James.
Yes, hello there.
Go ahead. What's on your mind?
Okay, well, good evening to you all. Anyway, I live here in Lebanon. I originally lived in Michigan. This is a true crime story. It was very sensational in Michigan, and it changed the laws about the revolving doors of letting criminals out. The year was about 1976. I was a witness in 76. I was 27. A 37-year-old man kidnapped a 12-year-old female. I pursued. I followed to 3 counties, just like in Tennessee, but in Michigan. We had no cell phone back in 76, and I had no CB.
Okay.
Anyway, I had no idea exactly his direction, but I pursued, I followed. He went this way, he went that way. He escaped my pursuit. I say one more time, he escaped my pursuit, and he pulled over in an isolated area. He raped her multiple times, didn't see it, according to the reports, broke her neck, discarded her like trash. I talked about it at work. I lost my job. As a star witness, I testified against the man.
Wow.
But I was let go, sued, won, traveled, was under death threat just like the judge. And I'm here in Tennessee. So you talk about true crime stories. Well, this was in Yankeetown, Michigan. So anyway, I'm haunted by it,
right.
But I couldn't do anything. I was hopeless, helpless. I was paralyzed. But I did what I did because my father was a former police officer in Detroit, Michigan in the 50s, and he said, one of these days, you're going to see something, and you're going to have to react. I did. So anyway.
Well, thank you. All right, let's thank you for that. Wow, that's quite a story.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts when you hear that? That's quite a story.
Yeah, I mean, there are always the what ifs, you know. In every case, there are witnesses and there are people involved that say, you know, if I had just stayed a little bit longer, if I had just asked the specific question. But a lot of times, these crimes are so calculated that it's really difficult to intervene. So, I mean, that's my takeaway from it, is the guilt that he's experiencing. I'm not sure that he would have had the ability to stop this person. If it hadn't been her, there probably would have been somebody after that.
All right. Thank you, James. Let's go to Monique. Hello, Monique.
Hi.
Hi. What's on your mind? Go ahead.
I watch the crime shows all the time, but it's because they're so interesting. From the ones where people are robbing the banks back to back to back, the wives that snap, the serial killers.
Right.
They're all amazing, and also the ones that go back to the person's childhood, and it explains how this person turned into the killer or bank robber that they are. They've done so much research on them, and it's reality TV. You know, the things at the movies you barely you know they're not real. So you actually get to see that these are actual real people. How did they end up doing this? And also, I would like to say, back in the day here in Nashville, I remember seeing it on the news where they said, hey, if you want a cheap date, you could go down to the courthouse to night court.
That's right.
Go in there and see that.
People would talk about that. So you're right. We've been fascinated forever with this stuff. Just go down to the courthouse and watch. You're absolutely right. Night court.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is the ultimate in reality.
Yes.
And there is that fascination. I mean, I think she hit several points about why people are so interested in this.
Right, and we're so fascinated, first of all, by the parts of our brains that we don't understand and our personality structure. But I think we're also fascinated by the fact that, you know, we're seemingly similar to a person, and you look at the trajectory of the person's life, and then at some point they're so vastly different from the way that we are, and there's sort of an excitement or fascination around, you know, what took them to the left and me to the right, you know. And
absolutely. I think we all want to explain it.
Right.
And so can we explain it? So we're fascinated by it. You study it. Is there a reason one person goes that far afield? Could we have foreseen that earlier, or not?
Yeah, again, there are those symptoms that we see in childhood and adolescence that lead us to believe that somebody could eventually have an antisocial personality disorder. It's the things that I mentioned earlier, just kind of the disregard for humans in general and animals, and the vandalism, just disregard for people's property and well-being. So we see those signs. But, you know, we also see children and adolescents who show some of those signs that don't end up being Ted Bundy.
Right.
So there's still the fascination with, you know, how does one person become so extremely violent, yet somebody else sort of curtails it, and then they become functioning member of society.
Let's go to Eric. Hello, Eric. Eric, are you there? Eric may not be there. All right, I'll put you on hold. Come back, Eric. One of the things, all right, so you mentioned this. Netflix came out with a tweet, I guess, talking about the fascination that people have had with him, okay? They talk about, I guess people have thought he's good looking. Women are saying he's good looking and are drawn to him. And then they're saying, you know, oh, there it is. There's been a lot of talk about Ted Bundy's hotness. Would like to gently remind everyone that there are literally thousands of men on the service, almost all of whom are not convicted serial murderers. So Netflix, I think they may have even taken that tweet off after they sent it out because it got a little pushback. But the point is, why, I guess let's focus on women, because there were a lot of women that were interested in Ted Bundy.
Right.
What's the draw, the fascination? Have you studied that?
Yes. I mean,
what is that?
It is the epitome of this psychopathic presentation. Even the woman who survived the attack, you know, he kidnapped her and she survived. She said this Ted Bundy that is depicted in this docuseries is exactly the person that he wanted you to think that he was. You know, he was very charming and charismatic. He convinced over 30 women to come with him and get in the car with him. And so I do think that people are fascinated and intrigued by the fact that he is seemingly normal. He's an attractive guy physically. You know, he's able to interact with people in a sort of a charming way. And I think maybe because there's been such a substantial amount of time since these murders have occurred, there's sort of some cognitive dissonance, and we're not feeling the same way about it that people were around the time that it happened.
Right.
So the reaction is a little bit, I mean, we're sort of reacting to a story as opposed to what was actually happening at the time.
That's a good point. But I am concerned by, okay, a woman married him, you know, in that time, and he had a child, which I didn't realize. And you see it in, I guess, in prison today, right?
Absolutely.
There are women who are drawn to that, and I wonder why that is.
Yeah, I would say 90% of the people I assess have pen pals. And
that's amazing.
Right? There are these people who have become fascinated with the case, and they start writing them. You know, in some ways, I think it's similar to the fascination that we have with celebrities. You know, just somebody who's different from us, who's in the spotlight. I think that's a piece of it. And the other part of it, I think, is this fascination with the unknown and what we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to put the puzzle together and understand it. And in some ways, we're never going to understand these people. They don't make sense or aren't rational. But there's a desire for us as human beings to understand things and make sense of them.
Let's go to Patricia. Hello, Patricia?
Yes.
Are you there? Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
I wanted to know what makes a person become bipolar. Is it something that was born into their personality or something that they grew into?
Okay.
That is my question.
Thank you. What about that?
That's a great question. Yes, there's certainly a biological component to bipolar disorder. So there are actually, so you have mood swings where you have depression and then mania, and there are actually changes in the neurotransmitters in the brain, which is what one psychiatrist claimed that Ted Bundy was diagnosed with. I didn't, in what I've read, I don't think that diagnosis fits. But yes, I think, and I want to make sure, since we're talking about serial killers, we're not equating that diagnosis with aggression or violence, because it's very different from somebody who is a psychopath.
Okay, but that is something that can be genetic.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, we're going to take a break. If you're on the line, Eric, I understand you're there, so hold on. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.